Inglés, inglés.
Muy buenas tardes a todos y a todas.
Good afternoon. Let us continue this program with the afternoon session. As announced, we will have an open session of the directors of Ibero-American Water and weather forecasting services of directors, and I will open this part of the CIMET. We have Professor Italas, General Secretary of the World Meteorology Organization, Dr. Marisa Garcia Garcia, Chair Lady of the Environment Agency of the Ministry of Environment and Technology of Cuba, Dr. Ana Casal, Director for Planning and Strategies of the State Meteorology Agency of Spain, and Dr. Jorge Tamayo, Coordinator of the Conference of Directors of Iberoamerica. To begin, we will give the floor to Dr. Ana Casals, Director for Planning and Strategies of the Spanish Meteorology Agency, to make the opening remarks. Thank you very much. For allowing me to open this session. Dear friends, I would like to express our sincerest thanks to our hosts and to Dr. Garcia Sopasos, our dear friend. I had the pleasure of meeting Marisa during the visit to Madrid. I was very surprised for her eloquence and ideas, and that's a difficult occasion to forget. She knows that. To both of you and to the organizers here, I would like to express my thanks because you are working so hard so that everything goes well. and for the organization of the Climate Change Congress and all the other events that are taking place at the same time as this 18th meeting of CIMET, which, by the way, coincides with the 20th anniversary of the CIMEC's creation. We should be proud of that, and we celebrate it. Also, thanks to this Congress, we are having an opportunity to know Cuba, a beautiful country, and to enjoy the kindness of its people, its contagious happiness, and the way in which they enjoy life and music and celebrations. I could see that during the opening session of the Congress in the Cuban National Aquarium, where we could meet them and people from other countries. Also, I want to point out it is so difficult to organize such a big conference and say that I must say thank you many times. And I ask for a good hand for the representatives of Cuban institutions, and especially for our friend Celso, the director of Cuban Meteorology Services, and his staff. They have made a great effort with us for the very moment we arrived in Havana. This meeting, oh, there's something else I would like to say. From in CIMET, we are holding the 1 month of the World Meteorology Organization. The director for Argentina's Meteorology Service, Dr. Saulo, is here. She's here with us. Was elected as the new Secretary General of World Meteorology Organization, and she will be so beginning in January next year. Besides being our friend, she is the first woman to hold the post of Secretary General of the organization. That must be celebrated too. She knows she will have to work hard because they're in a new stage that will witness great collaboration efforts. This will be encouraging for you, Celeste. You will have great challenges and changes in front of you, and that will also strengthen our meteorology services so that they're more inclusive, and we will have a society more committed with sustainability and climate change mitigation and resilience. This is a new period which is encouraging. It will be led by a great candidate and a great woman. Among all the challenges, one of them, which I referred to while talking about collaboration, is the great difficulty of objective things, that is implementation of our early warning system so that they reach out to all citizens without exception. This morning, Celeste told us about the many people living in cities where everything is there for everyone, but many people living in scattered places, and that's a great challenge. I will not talk about the Congress of the organization. There's a special session for that, but I am convinced that Celeste's election will mean for all our weather forecasting services a great challenge, and I'm sure that she will go beyond all our expectations. She knows that also that she will have all our support, the support of each and every one of us. We have a long debates before us are full of content, and so let's start our session and our meeting. In any case, I would like to thank you all for your attendance and your effort. Number one, I'd like to welcome all the persons who have joined us for the first time here in Cuba to attend this CIMEC meeting. Welcome and thank you for being with us and for being part of this wonderful community. Most certainly, in a few days, you will realize why I have used the word wonderful. Last year it was my first year for CME, and it was wonderful. Thank you very much, Anna, for your very warm expressions. And now we will give the floor to Professor Peter Izala, General Secretary of the World Meteorology Organization, so that he also addresses our CIMEC audience. You have the floor, sir.
Thanks for the opportunity to come to your meeting, and this is not my first time that I'm attending the CFN meeting. Actually, if I count correctly, I was attending the second CMET meeting which was organized ever. That was in Santa Cruz in 2005, and that was my first mission as a newly appointed WMO director. And since then, I think that this community has been evolving a lot, and from WMO's side, we are most happy to support these kind of natural groupings of and collaboration where you have common interest to work together. And some of our regions, like Region 4 or Region 2, they are fairly heterogeneous, and here you have more heterogeneous grouping, and by joining forces, of course, you can achieve more. And we are grateful for Spain for the support for this, and thanks to your financing, we have been able to organize these meetings. And it's a question whether the regional association meetings are more important than CFN meeting. At least CFN meetings have been organized on annual basis, and that makes it very, very strong. And in the past, you were also financing some projects through this CFN, this CMET activities, and now I understand that there are separate ways of financing. But we are grateful for Spain for the support for many countries, and there are also other players who have been supporting some development, like my home country Finland, and also Switzerland is now supporting the Andean countries, and that's most welcome. And of course, our big initiative for the coming years is early warning services for all. And Secretary General Guterres has already chosen 30 countries. We have been advising him which countries need assistance most, and we have picked those countries in such a way that there's an opportunity for WMO to see progress. There's an opportunity for UNDRR to see progress, and also Red Cross, Red Croissant is going to be active in those countries. And a couple of those countries are also your countries, and there are also some countries in the Caribbean which are belong to this first set of countries. And the basic idea is that by the end of 27, there would be up to 100 countries covered with such assistance. And we are very lucky that we have now 2 functioning financing instruments for that. I was just in a soft steering committee meeting in Copenhagen a couple of weeks ago, and there it was decided that the aim is to have 100 billion euros available by the end of this year. And we are interacting with the government of Arab Emirates, the COP28 presidency, and most likely they will also allocate some resources for that purpose. And our aim is that Green Climate Fund, which is major climate mitigation and adaptation financing institution, would soon decide to allocate $1 billion US for the early warning services for all. And there's a debate going on whether we should finance also middle-income countries, or whether we will stick only to the LDC and SIDS countries. And the decision at the soft steering committee was that we should first try to cover LDC and SIDS countries, but thereafter there may be also some financing for the middle-income countries. And actually, those 2 CMET countries are already those which are not LDC nor SIT countries. Actually, the only LDC country in this part of the world is Haiti, which is going to be one of the target countries. But all in all, we are very grateful for this community, and we are doing our utmost for supporting you. And one of the challenges that Celeste will have is this regional reform, which still needs to be completed, and there's also a recommendation that the location and staffing of the regional offices should be considered, and that's one option, whether it makes sense to continue the offices in Paraguay and Costa Rica, or do something else in the future. But that may be something for you next year, so we don't have perhaps time to arrange any tendering processes this year. But this and what is very unique in WMO is that the countries are able to collaborate, and the Med services have this appetite to collaborate. And I would like to see that also expanded to the hydrological community. Hydrological community is clearly lagging behind, but also in your region, I think that the hydrological cooperation potential is fairly good. So that might be something to be considered also for the future. And of course, at the national level, we would be happy to see closer cooperation between the meteorological and hydrological services, and build these multi-hazard early warning service centers. So, and we are grateful for the host. Thanks for the invitation. It's a pleasure to come here, and you have been very successful in getting support from your government for the Med service. And tomorrow I will have a chance to discuss with your minister, and I'm happy to promote future support for your important work. And of course, this region is also very vulnerable to impact of climate change, as was shown in the report, and that's also something which might promote your role at the national level in the future. With these words, thanks for the invitation, and would like to wish you most successful meeting here in Havana.
Thank you very much, Professor Dallas, for your intervention and your wishes of success to our CEMEC meeting. So, to officially open our meeting, we'll give the floor to Dr. Marisa Garcia Garcia, Chair Lady of the Environment Agency of the Science of Environment of the Republic of Cuba. Good afternoon. It is a great pleasure, and not just to fulfill a task, that I have accepted on behalf of the Minister and to represent her to open this meeting with your permission, and to great Professor Talas, General Secretary of WMO, and the esteemed directors of Weather Forecasting Services and the Water Services Services of Iberoamerica, and the permanent representatives of Ibero-American countries to the World Meteorology Organization. Guests and invited and members of CEMEC and Kodiak, on those who participate in our 8th Congress on Climate Change as part of this 14th International Convention on Environment and Development. It is an honor to welcome you this time in Cuba, to have in presence the meeting of directors of meteorological and water services, directors of Iberoamerica, as planned for since 2 years. But as you know, the world epidemiological situation resulting from COVID-19 prevented us from welcoming you in our country then. But we always were certain that through collective efforts and the contribution of science and innovation, we would overcome the pandemic. And we thank you very much for continuing present your proposal, continue presenting your proposal, and have this meeting in our country. We also especially thank your readiness and the readiness by the Spanish state-run weather forecasting agency and CIMEX secretariat, and the quick answer to hold this 18th meeting of directors of weather forecasting and the water services directors in Havana within the framework of our Climate Change Congress, which is part of our convention. In Cuba, the National Weather Forecasting Service has around 1,400 workers, and it operates 7 early warning and surveillance systems, including our 80 weather forecasting stations, our radars, and our 14 provincial weather forecasting centers, and the 9 research centers in the headquarters, all of which are in charge of doing research and providing scientific and technical services to protect human lives and the economy. Disaster risk reduction and the provision of new knowledge for sustainable economic and social development is paramount. At the present economic conditions in Cuba and the world, we have prioritized the expansion of our climate and weather forecasting services linked to production, food production, disaster reduction, the rational use of water and energy, among other objectives, all of which is based on the working experiences of the Cuban Weather Forecasting Institute in conjunction with agriculture, water resources, civil defense, and other institutions. And also the mass media, the traditional mass media, television, radio, written press, and digital press, whose representatives are now with us to cover this meeting, the 18th meeting of directors Ibero-America for hydrology, water services, and weather forecasting, or communications over their social networks to reach out to the most isolated places and users, services of information on climate and weather problems. We hope we continue connecting ourselves with Ibero-American services as a result of agreements from this meeting, and to express and propose the participation of our Cuban experts that become part of Latin American groups so that we can protect the environment and face climate change. Finally, I wish to thank the organizers of this meeting, and especially WMO and his regional office in the Americas, and the regional association 3 or 4, CIMEX secretariat, and the Spanish state-run meteorology service for the support they have given us to hold this meeting. And we invite you to debate on the main challenges facing meteorology services and our peoples to have a more just, resilient, and inclusive world for everyone. I wish you a lot of success in the holding of your meetings, and that your stay in Cuba allows you to know more about our country, about people, and where we give what we share what we have, and not to give what is in excess with our sisterly peoples. It is an essential principle of our solidarity. In this way, I officially open the 18th Conference of Directors of Weather Forecasting and Water Services in Ibero-America in Havana, Cuba. Thank you very much, and I wish you every success.
Muchas gracias a la doctora Maritza García.
We thank Dr. Marixa Garcia of the Environmental Agency, and
La primera presentación
the first
que quisiéramos
presentation that
pedir
we would
es al doctor Jorge Tamayo,
that we will
ingeniero
have is
que
Dr. Jorge Tamayo. Would
los
kindly
participantes
ask him to
hagan
make a
mensaje
presentation
sobre la
so that
CIMED,
the different
la
participants know what CIMED is, what is the
Meteorológico y
Conference of
Meteorológico
Directors
para
of Hydrological and Meteorological Services Centers of Iberoamerica. You have the floor, Doctor. Thank you, Celso. First of all, I want to join the congratulations and thanks for holding the Convention on Environment that has made possible the celebration of this meeting that, as Dr. Garcia said, was scheduled for January, March 2020. Before organizing the meeting, we had to stop, and we thank Celso again for reacting so quickly, and we had to wait. And I think we have harnessed what happened. We have harnessed the possibility of the convention to celebrate this meeting. I'm sure that we will have a good celebration by INSMED. I want to tell you what CMED is. Most of you know as directors of these centers, but we are going to present CMED to the rest of the community that has to do with methodology, environmental sciences, and others. Well, the first thing is CMED. This is a very strange name or acronym. It is a conference of directors of hydrological and meteorological service centers in Iberoamerica. We needed an acronym because it was a very long title. So that is why we have this acronym with that H and that M, to show that the meteorology and hydrology must go hand in hand when we talk about environmental sciences. So with this, we gave answers. We answered one of the requirements of the WMO Secretary General. In most of our services, this has been incorporated. The next slide, please. CMED is what we know for more than 150 years. They need to collaborate, to cooperate. Meteorology was developed because we were able to exchange data and information. We were able to collaborate between institutions. And this has been maintained throughout the years. And in the Ibero-American context, we harness the cultural and language affinity to create a forum that is a forum for work and cooperation between the different meteorological services, between the different directors to discuss, propose, and know the different elements to improve our services with a single purpose, to be able to improve the social and economic development of our societies. That is the purpose. So that is what we do in CIMED. We reactivated it in 2003, October 2003, with this new format. Since then, we have the participation of all meteorological services of the Ibero-American community. This includes the Ibero-American countries plus the countries of the Iberic Peninsula that for 20 years have been discussing effectively and in very friendly terms on the different actions to be taken through a program of methodological cooperation. All these discussions are included in a plan of action that fortunately has funds through a fund established by WMO, by Spain, and WMO has been and is a crucial element to foster all the activities that the CITHME are carrying out. The Methodological Cooperation Program has three lines of action. Institutional strengthening, how these centers should be, what type of services they should provide, and personnel duly trained to carry out all these activities. The program tries to foster cooperation between meteorological services, and it is aimed at domestic and regional needs. The CIMED website is the one that appears in the slide. Next slide, please. During all these years, well, which elements can we highlight? Well, there could be many, but I've thought that regarding the first line of action of the cooperation program, the institutional development, we have increased collaboration, and this collaboration has been systematized. We know that we have to collaborate. The advantage of this conference is that if we do this systematically, and then we can develop our activities. This has all through the support of WMO and through bilateral meetings and regional meetings, we have been able to increase the visibility of meteorological services. A problem that all meteorological services have is that we are not present in domestic policies. It seems that the only thing we do is to forecast if it's going to rain tomorrow or not, and that we have a lot to contribute, and that is what gradually and steadily we have been able to show. Another important element in our view is the fact that if we have common positions as an Ibero-American community. Sometimes we are not on the same page or on the same line, but now we have 22 countries, 22 meteorological services, 22 directors that have a common position on certain issues. And I think that has increased our visibility in the international scenario. Of course, projects for modernizing meteorological services have been fostered. Experts from one country going to another country to solve problems, and we have been able to be part of strategically relevant meetings, like, for example, the disaster risk reduction meetings. In COPs, we are increasingly present, not as individual meteorological services, but as the Ibero-American meteorological community. Maybe we see this as something natural, but I don't think this we can find in other parts of the world. So many meteorological services united and talking with one voice. This allows us to reach different institutions that can provide funds for our work and for our projects. The next slide, please. As to the services provided, there have been many activities. We have had climate change scenarios, not only for a country, but for a complete area. For the Americas, for example, alert systems based on experience of the Brazilian center. We have coordinated between different services to exchange information we detected that database management was lacking in some places, so we worked on that. We have supported climate forums, we have supported programs for droughts or floods to support national or regional services has been an important activity, or supporting regional training through regional programs. And the third element, which maybe is the most visible one, is capacity building. Since 2003, we have had more than 35 face-to-face courses, 65 courses, sorry. We have been able to increase online training. When we talk about 65 courses with more than 1,000 students, we're talking about face-to-face courses. So a number of, or a group of experts, meteorological experts in the region have developed a network that allow us to continue making progress and collaborating, because this means that we increasingly know more about each other. We have air quality, climate change, training of executives, anything dealing with meteorological service development are part of the training activities. Why? Because we have detected these requirements that have been submitted at different meetings by the different members of CIMED, so as to develop a training plan accordingly. When I said that having an Ibero-American meteorological network is unique in the world, I can say that there is another singularity. It's not only that we have a network dealing with environmental and atmospheric issues, but we also have a network on atmospheric issues. The Conference of Ibero-American Directors for Water Resources and the RIOD, the same thing, but for climate change. These three Ibero-American networks have the same mentality. We speak the same language, and this allows us to collaborate among ourselves and to develop activities that can solve sectorial problems with an intersectorial approach. And this I don't think we find in any other part of the world. We don't find in any other part of the world the possibility of joining these three sectors, meteorology, climate change, and water, in an easy and comfortable manner, answering the request made by the Secretary General of WMO regarding coordination with the water resources sector. So it is very easy to gather these directors. We work together. We have high-level meetings. In 2021, it was very difficult to have face-to-face meetings, but last year in Punta Cana, we had a face-to-face meeting of CODIA, ACIMED. There have been workshops for experts. There has been a significant collaboration by Spain and by the Ibero-American Secretariat of the Ibero-American Summit. We not only have a technical support, but also institutional support and the possibility of working together on all these issues. This is a line that is being increasingly promoted with very good results. In CIMED, we will have sessions talking about how to cooperate with CODIA, with CEGID, how to maintain our meetings, etc. Now let's talk about successes. On the one hand, we believe, it's not my belief, it has been repeatedly stated that CIMED's activity has been very important to develop capacities or build capacities in meteorological services since we started 20 years ago because of training, because of exchange of information and results. A key factor is that the priorities and activities are discussed and approved by the members. We are all speaking the same language. Some speak Portuñol, but I think in general we speak the same language and we can establish our priorities and design the activities to be implemented. All the meteorological services of the Ibero-American community are members of CIMED. There has been no problem in becoming member. It is an informal network. It has no statutes, it has no binding decisions, and I think that is an advantage. And the agreements are not binding in the sense that you have to put money, you have to pay. These are intentions that among all and with goodwill we can implement. Our collaboration with the other networks is important. In Ibero-American ministerial meetings, we are increasingly visible. We are invited. Some years ago, the meteorological service was not included. Even in the declaration of the heads of states, Ibero-American heads of states and presidents, it has been included, the need for well-developed meteorological services and coordinated actions has been included in the declaration. As Professor Talas has mentioned, his first trip as cooperation director was to Santa Cruz, to our third meeting in Santa Cruz. Another key element is that we have exchange with the users. There have been meetings, regional meetings with users. We don't do what we want. We do what it is wanted from us. And we also have had great support from the Spanish Cooperation Agency in terms of training in their training centers and to access funds from the European Union. We are on both sides of the Atlantic, so we can use European financing mechanisms and American financing mechanisms. This has allowed us to make a lot of progress with many stakeholders and access financing means. Not everything is nice. Well, we also have problems. Our main problem, and this is nothing new, lack of technical personnel. There is less and less personnel, and it is becoming increasingly difficult to maintain this personnel or staff. That is a problem we are facing. Our poor capacity to present initiatives to financing funds. We don't know how to do this. We don't know how to reach these funds. We don't have people dedicated to this task. And whenever we get funds, we don't have personnel to implement those funds. So these are problems that we have to solve little by little. There are projects where the executives have changed and there is no follow-up or continuity. We don't have the sufficient institutional representation. We don't have enough access to the different important political forums. We implement systems, but we cannot maintain these systems, so they collapse. So those who gave us the money to implement the system and the system collapsed because there is no maintenance, well, this doesn't look nice. And another element that I think is a problem is that we duplicate efforts, overlapping efforts. We need to collaborate with other agencies. We need to see how we coordinate activities so that we do not overlap efforts. Let us coordinate. One session in this meeting will be to talk about how we can coordinate our activities better. What else do we have? Well, we must contribute to everything that is being stated by WMO as a priority. Early warning for all, the effect of greenhouse gases, and other. The Ibero-American Summit has approved an environmental Ibero-American agenda, and they are waiting for us to contribute to this agenda. There we have a great opportunity to continue working to become more visible on the one hand, and on the other to have benefits for the society. A challenge is to maintain all this, that the methodological collaboration program can be maintained, make progress, and improve it in the future. Continue collaboration with CODIA, with RIOCC, with the Ibero-American Secretariat, with other cooperation initiatives in the region so that we do not duplicate efforts or overlap efforts and to be more visible. Meteorological services must be able to provide all these services, and together we can do more. So we try to be united so that we have regional and international strength, and we also have to be strong nationally, because if we don't have support at the national level, it will be very difficult to have support at other levels. This is all. Thank you for your attention, and we have several days to discuss all these matters.
Muchas gracias a Jorge por su.
We thank Jorge for his presentation. When we were discussing about today's agenda, we thought it was good that Jorge would talk about CIMED. We have some new permanent representatives that we did not have the opportunity of sharing these experiences with them and to share it with other participants in the Congress. We thought it was important to reach the goals that Jorge mentioned. Personally, I believe that all permanent representatives here, at least those who have been permanent representatives for some years now, will agree with me when I say that CIMED is Jorge Tamayo and that Jorge Tamayo is CIMED. So thank you, Jorge, again. With this, we conclude the opening session of the 18th Conference of Directors of Meteorological and Hydrological Service of Ibero-America. We will change the sets now to continue with our session, because we will have two master lectures, very important master lectures, and then a panel to conclude. So now the members of the chair, please take your seats in the audience, and thank you once again.
Voy a presentar la conferencia de José Marengo, ¿no? Y para que me dé tiempo a cambiar también los papeles y después sigo. Ah, ¿me vas a dar eso? Sí, ahora déjame presentarlo. Sí, sí, yo tengo.
Bien, como les decía, cambiamos ahora un segundo los roles, pero continuamos con la presentación.
Now continue with the presentation that we have in the program. We will start the session on extreme events and climate change scenarios in Latin America and the Caribbean, challenges regarding early warnings and implementation of early warning systems. We will be talking about the importance of strengthening the early warning systems and the increasing need to act in a coordinated manner to address meteorological events in our region. It is a pleasure for me to introduce a speaker who is not here with us. He wanted very much to be here with us, but we will have to see it on video. José Marengo, lecture, and he is a regional and global authority on all these topics. Regretfully, due to some health problems, he's not here with us, but he has shared with us his presentation that we will now share with all of you.
José Antonio Marengo, soy coordinador.
I'm the General Coordinator of the National Center for Monitoring and Alerting on Sao Paulo. And I'm going to make this presentation in a climate change situation. We have El Nino, we have the deforestation of the Amazon. I want to thank WMO for inviting me to make this presentation in the context of the 14th International Convention on Environment and Development in Havana, Cuba. Well, initially we can say that weather extremes are changing in time and space. Latin American and Caribbean countries are increasingly suffering from these intense events. Heavy rainfall, lack of rain, hurricanes are affecting the population and strategic infrastructure. The risk that these disasters the extremes may generate disasters like fires, landslides, floods, affecting vulnerable population is increasing, particularly in the poorer areas. Water insecurity, food insecurity, energy insecurity is being hardly hit by all this. So we require collaboration among scientists because the warning systems, the multi-hazard early warning systems that issue early warning on disasters are working with meteorological and hydrological services, and this needs to be improved. This helps the population to have a greater risk perception in terms of disasters. Civil defense, especially because they are the ones who convey or disseminate these warnings among the population. We need to develop these multi-hazard early warning systems and improve communication and build this perception on the population that disasters can kill persons. The observational studies of the IPCC, well, we see the temperature and then we see the droughts This shows that maximum temperature events, hot days and hot nights, have increased, and in Latin America and the Caribbean, in some areas like Central America, in the northeast of the Amazonia and part of the Andes. The consecutive dry days is increasing. This leads to drought risk. Analyzing 2022 and based on the state of climate for Latin America and the Caribbean report for 2022, the most outstanding case was the drought in Mexico, in Nuevo León and Tamaulipas, were the most affected states, and 30%, around 30% of the territory in Mexico was experiencing drought. Here we see the drought map in Mexico, and to the left, the integrated drought index. They show similar characteristics, both of, and this is associated to La Nina. We have been suffering La Nina for 3 years, and we're starting now with El Nino. Here you can see the percentage of areas affected by drought. 2021 and 2022 show similar situations. And within the extremes, we have the different hurricanes. Here we have the different hurricanes that hit the Central American and Caribbean region. Here we have Bonnie, that affected Nicaragua, Costa Rica, El Salvador, and Southeast Caribbean. Hurricane Julia, that affected Nicaragua, Salvador. Hurricane Fiona, that was also a major hurricane that affected Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, and Turks and Caicos Island. And this hurricane that affected West Caribbean and Cuba. Some of the images that you are seeing are the worst hit areas. In terms of droughts and floods, they are increasingly frequent in recent years. I'm showing some regional analysis in the case of the Amazonia, Rio Negro, one of the affluents of the Amazon River. The maximum levels are increasing, droughts are also increasing, and you can see in the figure to the left, these three figures are the moment in which Rio Negro went over 29 meters, which is considered a flood. And another case in the region, in central region of South America, we see the drought that has affected the wetlands. That drought also affected in the 60s and 70s. The problem is that the vulnerability of the population was less. But now we have farms producing, cattle raising farms, we have food producing farms, so they are becoming more and more vulnerable. A metropolitan region, well, I selected Sao Paulo because I have the data. We see that in the last 2 years in the metropolitan area of Sao Paulo, rainfall has increased. The green, dark green are the rainy days with more than 80 millimeters, and the clear one is more than 100 millimeters. Here we can see to the left that the number of days with higher values is higher in the last 20 years that compared with the 1960s. And in another station in Sao Paulo, we see that increase in the frequency of extreme events. This is also seen in other cities of the region. And when you work with risk, with hazard, vulnerability, and exposition, you need to know that risk does not depend exclusively from the weather. Climate or weather is one of the components. We have other factors that have nothing to do with the weather and that are very important, like governance and social and economic development. Here is where we need to pay attention to urban policies like building or settlements in risk areas. That is part of the political aspect. And within the impacts, here in 2022, we have the extreme event impacts on agriculture. For the case of soy, we see in the south part of the Brazil this red area where we have the poorest condition in terms that they can be highly affected by hot waves, heat waves, and droughts, and also in Argentina. And for corn, we have areas in Argentina that have higher risk after June 2022. That composition of extreme events or compound events is quite clear here. And in Latin America and the Caribbean, we have fire associated to deforestation and changes in land use. The hot heat waves correspond to Brazil, 12% to Argentina, and 11% to Bolivia. These are statistics that are repeated every year, and this is being discussed within the environmental agenda in Brazil. In the case of extreme events, well, we understand the causes of disasters. Rural populations in Brazil are moving towards urban areas in the periphery of or in the outside of big cities, and they are vulnerable to landslides. To the right, you can see a landslide that affected buildings and houses, and here you see the number of houses in just a small area. If the tallest house collapses, the rest will collapse. That is something very common in Brazil. So we can have a quick list. In Colombia, we had 3 deaths because of a landslide. In Brazil, due to heavy rainfall. In Peru, also due to heavy rainfall, floods in the department of Ucayali. In Colombia, we have landslides, flash floods. The same happens in Chile with fires, and in Tabasco, Mexico, we also see floods. In Bolivia, also in La Paz, heavy rainfalls, floods in Venezuela, in Brazil, in Paraguay, in Haiti. There have been casualties in Brazil, in all countries in 2022 and 2023 have suffered a disaster due to heavy rainfalls and lack of urban planning, people living in risk areas. Two specific cases, Recife in northeast Brazil, where 230 persons died due to floods and landslides, and weather forecast showed all this phenomena. It rained in very vulnerable areas, areas that had been already detected as vulnerable, and many people died due to this. It wasn't very clear when the risk warnings reached the population that could have reduced the disaster impacts. This is what happened in San Sebastián, in Sao Paulo coastal area. You can see the photo in to the left. This is January 2023. Everything in green, the box where we have Barra de Sai region, the most affected area, and in February 2023 you see all that green area where we had landslides in 2023. This was in less than 24 hours. I think it is the heaviest rainfall in the recent history of Brazil. in the um, here you have the accumulation for 2 days. This and the respective impacts. So, thinking about climate change, IPCC shows warming in big areas and areas that can be affected by drought. And here you have a summary of areas in Latin America that can be affected by drought. Almost all Latin America can be affected. These are areas that are already experiencing drought. And in the case of the Amazon, it regulates the climate in the region. We have impacts resulting from fire, agriculture, cattle raising, and deforestation. The change in land use also is a cause for climate change and for the different extreme events. So this is when we thought about the point of no return. Concentration of CO2 increases 1 part per million. There is a warming of over 4 degrees. We have 13% right now. This can collapse in the tropical forest, and then it could have a different type of climate or weather in the future. Of course, all this is modeling. There is still a huge uncertainty, but it is a potential scenario. As you can see in the maps, the red shows a warming, and the brown shows drought, and green shows rainfall. In this case, rainfall in Southeast South America is extremely heavy. Now we have El Nino. It's too early to see if we will have a super El Nino or mega El Nino. It depends on the modeling. Today, warming is not over 3 degrees, but this is continuously changing, and there are several areas affected by El Nino. In Central America, June, July, and August, there will be less hurricanes or maybe normal number of hurricanes. In the case of South America, they will have cold winters, more or less very cold winters, and we have recent images of increasing temperature in the Pacific, east and west. And when we work with risk management, it is important to know how we address problems and how we have to adapt ourselves so that we can think about adaptation in the future. And Latin American countries have already chosen, in terms of adaptation, for agriculture, food security, water, health, biodiversity, and disaster risk reduction. Mitigation refers to transportation, energy consumption, and change in the land use. So, to conclude here, we can say that disaster risk is notorious, and it's a combination of meteorological and non-meteorological factors like vulnerability of the population, early warning for landslides and floods can be done automatically. Of course, you need a strong investment, and you have to work together with civil defense or whatever organization works that sector in the different countries. It's not enough to identify a hazard. You need to know that this hazard, this risk, must be received, understood, and processed by the population through communication. We need strong initiatives to support civil defense bodies so that the vulnerable population can become more resilient and face these disasters caused by extreme meteorological events. And of course, states and municipalities must have contingency plans to know what people have to do in case of a disaster, when there is a warning, a disaster warning, and all that will reduce the vulnerability of the population and the exposition of human beings. With this, I conclude my presentation. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Bueno, reiteraba nuestro agradecimiento.
We thank again Dr. Jose Marengo,
Director de Investigación y
Director of
Desarrollo
Research
del
and
VIII
Development,
y autor líder del reporte de
leading
estado escrito para
author
América Latina y el
of
Caribe
the
por
climate
su
report.
intervención. En estos momentos invitamos
Now we
al
invite
profesor Peter Itala, secretario
Itala,
general de la
General
Organización
Secretary
Meteorológica
of the
Mundial,
World Meteorological
quien
Organization,
presentará la
who
iniciativa
will
global
present
de
the
las
Global
Naciones
Initiative
Unidas,
of the United
alerta
Nations,
temprana
early
para
warning
todos.
for all.
Así que, profesor.
So, Professor.
So thanks again, and this is my third presentation, and I guarantee that this is the final one. No fourth presentation today. So I will partly repeat what I have already said at the Congress, and not all of you were present there, but we have been promoting these early warning services for all initiative, and I will also tell about a couple of other issues that you decided at the last Congress. Next, please. So some of these issues have been handled by the United Nations Climate Core Group, where I'm one of the 4 members, and this early warning services for all is a fruit of that group, where I have been a member of for the past 7 years, and there we have been first paying attention to the fact that we have major gaps in the observing systems, which is a challenge for early warning services, and it's also a challenge for basic climate understanding, and that was further triggering the fact that as part of our adaptation work, we realized that investments in early warning services is one of the most powerful ways to adapt, and also where the cost of investment, cost-benefit ratio of the investment is one of the highest. Next, please. So, and these reforms, I don't have to go through them, but we have carried out the reforms, and thanks to those, we have been, for example, able to create new data policies, GBON and SOF, and I'm very proud of the staff of the WMO. We have now really state-of-the-art staffing, which are serving you well, and that's part of the result of the reform process. Next, please. And this I have shown many times, that we are also talking about economic challenges. The text may not be too visible for you, but the World Economic Forum, where the heads of state and the biggest companies, CEOs, come together in every January to Davos in Switzerland. They are making annually an estimate which are the biggest risks for the global economy, and for the past years, failure of climate mitigation, failure of climate adaptation, and disaster risk reduction issues are the number 1, 2, and 3 risks globally. At the moment, many of your countries are facing economic challenges, and which is partly related to this printing of dollars and euros and rise of inflation and energy costs, and many countries are suffering because of that. So that's a short-term challenge, this cost of living crisis, but in the 10 years scale we are going to see this climate as a major risk. Next, please. And the mandate for these early warning services was given by Secretary General Guterres, and we have had very great pleasure to have him more and more interested in the work of WMO, and that's why he gave us a mandate to lead preparation of the first proposal for COP27, and that's what we did. Next, please. This plan was prepared jointly with the UNDRR, with ITU and Red Cross Red Croissant, and we presented it at the COP27 in Sharm el Sheikh last year. Next, please. And the basic fact there is that only half of our 193 members have proper early warning services in place. In South America, the situation is according to the statistics, fairly good. But once we go to Central America or Caribbean, there are already bigger gaps, and we have major gaps also in African countries and also in the Pacific island states. Next, please. And we prepared this plan as a joint venture, and first we have to know where to prepare for, what kind of disasters we are having today and what kind of disasters we are going to have in the future. And one of the questions at the moment in climate modeling is whether we are able to say what's going to happen to the weather extremes. The impacts of climate change, they are very much felt through these extremes, not so much through these average changes, and that's why the climate modeling community is eager to go to higher resolution of climate modeling to be able to describe what may happen to the weather extremes. I spent this week, Monday and Tuesday, in Berlin at the Max Planck Institute conference, where we had world-leading modeling communities present, and there's going to be a clear message from that community that we have to pay attention to this kilometer scale climate modeling to describe the extremes and also to describe the hydrological cycle in a better way. And this is about this disaster risk knowledge, and it's also this preparedness, which are two pillars of the plan. And this third pillar, which is very much the core business of WMO, is the fact that we have to invest in the basic observing systems, and we have to invest in the early warning service capacities and related IT systems, and also delivery of the services and products for various users and customers. And we also have to train the users and customers. And also this impact-based forecasting is going to be important there to, for example, get the emergency management authorities more on board. Next, please. And this event was already held in Sharm el Sheikh last November, and then we had the United Nations Water Conference in March in New York, and there they were paying lots of attention to early warning services and also availability of both meteorological and hydrological data. And then in September we will have a high-level climate summit hosted by Secretary General Guterres, and early warning services is going to be one of the items there, and I was invited to present that, and we will get some stories from countries where we have already seen progress. And in October there will be Open Science Conference by World Climate Research Program in Kigali, Rwanda, and there we will discuss, for example, this kilometer scale climate modeling issue, and also that conference is supposed to support such an initiative. And finally, in November, late November, early December, we will have COP28, and we have already started discussions with the incoming president. I have been a couple of times in Abu Dhabi, and I have met the president, and they are very happy to promote early warning services for all this greenhouse gas watch that we approved at the Congress, and also this kilometer scale climate modeling initiative. Next, please. And here are some figures from this Sharm el-Sheikh event where Secretary General Guterres was chairing the meeting, and we had also 10 heads of state present, and several of my colleagues, and for example the Vice President of Microsoft, Brad Smith, was there. And we are going to have also private sector engaged in the work, and they are eager to contribute, and they are not running for money, but they are running for public good. And we have already Microsoft, Google, and Meta, which is owning Facebook, for example, interested in contributing to the success of early warning services for all. Next, please. And in Geneva, we have had meetings with the cabinet of Antonio Guterres, and then we have had a couple of meetings in Abu Dhabi, and we will have a 3-day workshop in Abu Dhabi late September to promote those issues, and also try to attract financing from Arab Emirates for those initiatives. And in Geneva, we have been working together with UNDRR, ITU, and Red Cross, Red Croissant. Next, please. And one of the needs is related to training. We have to train also experts, and we have statistics on the needs, and we have also statistics on the needs of region 3 and 4, and it's clear that we have to improve both the technical skills of the Met services and also the skills of the forecasters. And the basic idea is that there would be more access to high-level products. For example, ECMWF has decided to go to totally free data policy, and we have already agreed with them that they will provide data and without extraction costs for those countries who are beneficiary countries of the early warning services for all. So that's a new development from their side, and besides that, we have also other centers which are providing data, and also many satellite data providers are going to support the work. Next, please. And you have seen these maps already, that where we have gaps in both the ground-based observing systems and sounding observing systems. And we had a meeting of SOF steering group in Copenhagen 3 weeks ago, and there it was made an agreement that there will be 62 countries as first instance where the investments will be made, and they are mostly LDC and CIS countries, and those countries that Secretary General Guterres has chosen. And there was a debate whether we should invest also in middle income countries, and that's going to be a question in the future, and it's a little bit a philosophical question, how much players like WMO could take responsibility of issues which are basically responsibilities of the governments. So the governments are of course supposed to take care of the observing systems in the countries, and that's a debate that will be continued. And as part of SOF, we will reserve some money for the maintenance of the systems, and that's also one way to ensure that there would be something running already in a 10 years time scale. And quite often there have been some investments in observing systems, and sometimes they have been made outside of the Met services, and the sustainability hasn't been great. Next, please. And I have already shown this IPCC report where we have 3 maps, global maps, one for enhancement of heat waves, which are these red symbols, and practically everywhere in the world, excluding southern part of South America and some parts of Central Africa and some parts of USA. We have seen a statistically significant increase of heat waves. And the green symbols indicate where we have seen increase of flooding events, and there we have plenty of gray symbols which are indicating that we don't have enough data to say whether there has been a change, and that's again echoing the fact that we have to improve the basic observing systems. And in the lowermost panel we have a similar global map for drought, and there we have less these gray symbols, but there are also some of those. But also for basic climatological purposes, we need to enhance the basic observing networks. Next, please. And here you can see what kind of changes we have already seen. So climate change is very visible in many fields, and as I already said in my morning presentation, it's very practically sure that we will break the all-time temperature record during the coming 5 years, and it's very likely that we are going to be fairly close to the 1.5 on temporary basis, especially if we are going to see a strong El Nino coming. And this heat content of the ocean is very, very striking, and that's also having impact on evaporation from the ocean, and it's also giving energy for the tropical storms. And we have started, for example, seeing tropical storms hitting southeastern part of Africa. For example, Madagascar has been exposed to cyclones more often than they used to be in the past. And one of the new features is that we have started seeing a melting of Antarctic sea ice cover, and also this Antarctic glacier has started melting, and what is going to be the speed of that melting is going to be a good question. And again, in our workshop in Berlin this week, it was demonstrated that with this higher resolution of models, we could better describe the physics of melting of Antarctic glacier, where the intrusion of water under the glacier is one of the drivers, and the risk is quite remarkable, and if we would, there's a risk to see even 10 meters of sea level rise by 2300, which would be, of course, a global disaster. And the melting of glaciers, that's very clear. It's more clear than the case that I was showing in the morning. And sea level rise has doubled, and that will continue for even thousands of years, which is, of course, bad news. Next, please. And as I already said, with the current climate models, we can describe these weather averages quite well, and even those poor models that we were using in the 80s have been able to describe what has been happening so far, but we are not able to say too much about these extremes. And here we have some examples of extremes that took place last year. Drought in Horn of Africa, where there was also a component of La Nina embedded, very severe flooding in Pakistan, heat waves in Europe, China, North America, heat, drought, and wildfires in China, and also this Hurricane Ian, and which was hitting USA and Cuba. And I was already telling about the hurricanes that you have been facing here last time. Neither of those can be described with the current climate models. Next, please. And we have hired now socioeconomic expertise to WMO, and we have started thinking of the economic losses related to those which have been growing fivefold since the 70s, and the most dominant ones are flooding and storm, which are also very much visible in, for example, Caribbean. Next, please. And I was showing this at the Congress. We have now described the economic losses related to various disasters, and here the symbols are very small. You don't see them, that there are various disasters, and this is valid for the richest countries. You can see an increase of the amount of the cases, but the symbols are fairly small, and the size of the symbols is describing what kind of relative impact they are having on GDP of the countries. Next, please. And here we have the middle income countries. The symbols are already much larger, and it's these tropical cyclones and storms and flooding events which are having the biggest fraction here, and you can see that there has been an overall increase. And the third one, next one, is can I have the next one? This is for VIII countries, and again you can see that the symbols are very large, and the economies are maybe hit by even several hundreds of percents. In the previous case, there may be 15 to 20% drops of GDP, but this is very dramatic, and those are very much related to tropical cyclones, and especially in Caribbean region. Next, please. Socio-economic impacts, there has been a positive trend in this food insecurity since 2005, but during the past years we have seen negative development taking place again, and this has been also hitting your part. There have been 28 million people who have been facing food insecurity last year, and also in the Horn of Africa, we have about the same size of cases, and there were displacements, and for example in Brazil, more than 600,000 people were displaced. Next, please. And the sea level rise question is really striking. We have seen an increase of the sea level rise. And if we go to 3 degrees, we would see, again, doubling of the sea level rise pace, and the risk of this up to 10 meters sea level rise by 2300 has been described by scientists of NASA. This is, of course, one of the not so likely things to happen, but the risk is such a major one that we have to have better science to study this case. Next, please. And these water resources, future water resources, that's also a good question. And as I was saying in the morning, for example, in the Andean region, you can see all these light blue colors indicate water which is coming from melting of glaciers, and you can see lots of light blue color in some parts of Andean region, and also Rocky Mountains, and also in Central Asia especially, and Himalayan region. Even dominant part of the water in the rivers is having the origin from melting of glaciers, and once these are shrinking, we will have less such component available. Next, please. And we have now also information on what's happening to groundwater resources, and globally we have seen a negative trend, but of course there are also regional differences. But in your case, for example, what's happening with the Amazonian region, which was also touched by the previous speaker, is something fairly striking. And if you look at the IPCC scenarios, in general we expect to see drier Amazonian region, and this deforestation also plays role in such an evolution, and that's of course something that we have to deal with fairly carefully. And Eurasian continent in general has been losing groundwater resources, and water is going to be one of the key drivers of the climate debate, and there are good reasons for that. Next, please. And then once we talk about energy production, it's also an issue course, hydropower, which has been, you have been facing also here in your part of the world. Last year, we have also the classical thermal power plants. They are dependent on cooling power, and so is the case also for the nuclear power plants. And once we have less and warmer water in the rivers, we will have challenges with various ways of energy production. Next, please. And finally, these greenhouse gas issues where we have been breaking records year by year. Next, please. And we know what is the fraction of coming from fossil fuel consumption, from deforestation, especially in the tropical areas, and what is the role of methane here. Next, please. And there are big uncertainties related to the terrestrial component of carbon. What are the sources and sinks of carbon, and also we have limited understanding of the sources of methane. We have seen a record increase of methane concentration last year, and we don't fully understand the reason behind that. We know that it's coming from tropical wetlands, it's coming from cattle, and it's coming from rice paddies, but we don't fully understand this fairly dramatic increase of methane concentration. Next, please. And that's why you approved at the Congress this new initiative, Global Greenhouse Gas Watch program, and for example, the European Copernicus program might be interested in playing an operational role in that. And the basic idea is that we would be able to have annual reporting on the sources and sinks of carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide, which will be also very important material for the COP climate negotiation process. And this is something that we are proposing to be approved at the COP 2028 as well. And there's also need to enhance the amount of stations, and in your part of the world, we don't have too many GO stations, and it would be great to have more such stations established, and this is also one of the issues for the future. Next, please. And finally, I would like to say that there's no return back to the good old days. We have already injected so much carbon dioxide to the atmosphere that we are not going to return back to the last century's temperatures. As you can see from this graph, this very low means 1.5 degrees warming rate. Low means 2 degrees, and then we are going to higher numbers, 3 and 4 degrees warming with the higher cases. Next, please. And if you look at this hottest day of the year, it will be fairly dramatic if we go to higher numbers. And again, this what's going to happen in the Amazonian region is fairly striking, especially in this 3 and 4 degrees world, which would have major impacts. And of course, even in 2 degrees case, there's lots of color in the Amazonian region. Next, please. And what's going to happen to the soil moisture? That's also one of the good questions. And in all cases, in the upper panel where we have soil moisture changes, both Americas are going to be drier. So that's bad news. And if you go to these higher numbers, it's even more dramatic. It's even the biggest changes worldwide that we may expect to see. Next, please. And then once we talk about impacts on human health, and if you think of the weather that we are having here today with high temperatures and humidity, they are having negative impact on human well-being as we can face if we go outside here, and the higher the warming rate, the larger areas would face this combined impact of heat and humidity. Next, please. And finally, at our workshop in Berlin, we agreed that we should promote establishment of this kind of global consortium of climate modeling, and there's a need for this kind of classical climate modeling to estimate what's going to happen to the averages, but there's also need to go to these higher resolution ones, and there are already 21 places worldwide where this is taking place, and in your part of the world it's very few places, and it would be great to get wider engagement also from your part of the world. It's very much Europe, North America, and rich Asian countries driven approach. Next, please. And engagement of the private sector is also an opportunity for us, and we shouldn't see this private sector engagement as threat. They are not interested in taking over your business at the Met Services, but they are very eager to play complementary role and bring, for example, computer resources, cloud services, and new means of which you could use in your work. And I'm confident that the private sector is going to be a good partner for us. Next, please. That's all from my side, and I was covering a little bit wider area than just this early warning services for all, but also in early warning services for all, there's a good progress going on, and that's going to be one of the challenges for Celeste and WMO staff to keep it in good shape and reach this goal that we would have 100% coverage of early warning services by the end of 2027. And if that goes well, you may get the second term as Secretary General. Thank you.
Bien, muchas gracias al profesor.
Thank you, Professor,
por su conferencia
for your
magistral.
master presentation.
Nos vamos acercando cada vez más
We are getting closer
a
to
cómo enfrentar la
the
problemática
way
global,
of dealing with the global issues
las particularidades
and the
de cada una de
specificities
nuestras
in
regiones.
each region.
La información precisamente derivada
The information
del reporte del
coming
estado del
from
clima en
the
la región de América Latina
climate
y Caribe
situation report in Latin America and the Caribbean
con contundencia
shows
la
openly
tendencia creciente
the growing
a la
trend
ocurrencia de eventos
to the occurrence of
extremos
extreme events
que ocurren
of
en
several
buena
types
parte de nuestras regiones
occurring in
geográficas.
the various parts of our geographical region. As stated here, these events every year kill persons, destroy living beings, and interrupt development, particularly in more vulnerable and less developed or developing countries. The experience of our meteorology and the climate community has been making efforts for decades to provide our information service in a precise and timely manner to mitigate adverse effects from this phenomena. It is not an easy task, and that is why the presentation by the Secretary General of WMO is a call to redouble efforts so that the early warnings arrive or benefit everybody. This global initiative requires a lot of innovation and effort, financial efforts, and also the need to capitalize on good practices, lessons learned, the existing structures to attain the objectives that have been set, and therefore ensure early warning centers focusing on persons who are more efficient and sustainable. That is why on this occasion of this session we have organized the next panel, which will discuss reference elements to make progress with the early warning services in our countries based on the experiences in various geographical and operational areas. Therefore, I invite the following panelists for this last panel of the afternoon. I invite Colonel Jose Pereira, Executive President of INAMED Venezuela, please.
De igual forma,
Also,
invito a la
I
doctora
invite Dr. Arlene Line,
directora y coordinadora de la
Director and
Organización
Coordinator
Meteorológica
of the World
para que
Meteorology
nos
Organization of the
acompañe en el
Caribbean,
panel,
to be part of the
al
panel.
ingeniero
Engineer Luis Menjivar,
director general del
General
Observatorio
Director
Ambiental de
of
El
the Environment
y al
Observatory of El
señor
Salvador,
Rodney
and
Martínez,
Mr. Rodney
representante de la
Martinez,
Organización
representative
Meteorológica Mundial
of the World
para
Meteorology
Norteamérica,
Organization for
Centroamérica
North,
y el Caribe.
Central America, and the
Muchas
Caribbean.
gracias a los panelistas
We thank the
por
panelists
acceder a acompañarnos
for
y
accepting
les
to
explico
make their
que
presentations,
el panel
and the panel,
consistirá, parecido al anterior de
as
la
before,
mañana, en dos rondas de preguntas
will
específicas a
include
cada uno de los
2
panelistas,
rounds of
luego de
questions
las
for
cuales
panelists, and after
abriremos,
which,
en dependencia del tiempo que nos vaya
depending on the
restando,
time we have
algún
left,
espacio para preguntas y
some
respuestas de las
questions
personas
and
que nos
answers
acompañan en el auditorio.
from the floor.
Para las preguntas, los panelistas
For
tendrán
the
7 minutos para
questions,
responder. Y
panelists
bueno,
will have 7
luego,
minutes to respond.
que podamos debatir esos aspectos,
After we
pues,
discuss these
pasaríamos
matters,
a las preguntas del auditorio.
we'll have a question from the floor.
Estamos listos,
If we are ready,
comienzo
I will
con el
begin
coronel José
by
Pereira,
giving the floor to Colonel Pereira,
presidente ejecutivo de INAMEC.
the Executive President of INAMEC.
Preguntar lo siguiente:
And I would like to
¿cuáles
ask
son las
this,
barreras más
which are
importantes
the most important barriers which, in your view,
deben atender los
are
servicios
to be
meteorológicos
dealt
y
with
hidrológicos
by
nacionales
national
para lograr que la
weather
población
forecasting
más vulnerable pueda responder
services
efectivamente
so that
a las alertas tempranas? ¿Qué
vulnerable
aspectos
populations can respond
deberían
quickly
priorizar?
to early warning systems and informations? What are the measures to be taken? Thank you. We are very thankful to you, Celsi, for presiding this meeting. It has been a success, and I know that it will be an even greater success. Thank you for everything. This is Cuba. Not everything is solved with financial resources. It is also necessary that you want to do things. Cuba has over 60 years of an economic blockade. When it comes to risk management and the preparedness among communities, it is ranking first among Latin American nations. When there is a hurricane in the Caribbean, we see very well the consequences as to human losses and in Cuba and in the rest of the Caribbean, and there is a big difference between the two. It is not said by me, it is reported in statistics, it is reported by the press. It is a fact. And it is a matter of wanting to do things too. It is devoting yourself to training, to education, to the training of various actors. First, our weather forecasting services and emergency risk and disaster management services people, that is civil protection and civil defense. I mean, we must get ready. We have to work with the most vulnerable communities. Also, risk maps should be drawn, which are the communities that are to be prioritized. And then you go to the communities and work with them to know what to do when there is an alert of dangerous meteorological phenomenon. We have been working together with assisting the people of Cuba on early warning systems, and in Venezuela we have created low-level weather forecasting stations in communes. I mean, we go to communities, we create these stations with early warning systems, with the siren and so on, and the work on people so that they get trained and ready. I mean, and that they know where to go in case there is a heavy rains, for example. So the limitation I see, the constraint I see, is that sometimes things are described in a very easy way, and sometimes institutions need a strong movement to be able to, or incentive to be able to act. And I think that that incentive is there for the world now. It is a crucial, important moment to really look after our communities. Money is essential, but even more essential is the fact that you want to do things and to devote yourself specifically to the awareness of communities and the improvement of communities, of institutions dealing with these matters. Thank you very much for your information and for your participation in the panel. Now we will ask the question to Dr. Arlene Eint. I would like to thank her because she had just arrived and she has come to the session immediately, and she has kindly accepted to be here and to participate in the panel. And we want to ask Dr. the following questions. There are two great achievements in the Caribbean: the regional consortium of early warning systems and the development of early warning data dissemination through climatic timescales. Could you share with us, with the American people, how these two big regional initiatives are making a contribution to strengthening local and national capabilities, and what would be the main lessons learned and what recommendations you might give us for the two important Ibero-American solutions? Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here. Muchas gracias por la invitación. My first time in Cuba, although I grew up as a neighbor, only 90 miles away in Jamaica, so vecina. First, I want to define the two arrangements that have been described. One of them is the Regional Early Warning System Consortium, and that has been led by the Caribbean Disaster and Emergency Management Agency, and it includes an array of partners that include regional institutions involved in public health, in disaster management, in meteorological services, in hydrological services, and it also includes a number of national entities, including the Jamaican National Meteorological Service, as well as the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management. And they were added because they were serving as an excellent best practices example for the region, and they were invited to participate in this regional consortium for that purpose, so that they could share with the region some of their best practices that allowed them to work closely together. We also included in this regional consortium academia. It includes the University of the West Indies, the University of Guyana, and included in the University of the West Indies is not only the climate studies group at Mona, but also the seismic unit, because this is in the Caribbean. We have multiple hazards, including seismic hazards, and so volcanic ash and lahars and all of those things came to bear in 2021, as did an earthquake. That was our year of many, many hazards. Together in the island of Hispaniola, you had three things at once. So the consortium was developed in order to answer and fill these gaps and to standardize and streamline the early warning systems across our region. There had been established prior to that, under the Global Framework for Climate Services, the early warning systems for across time scales. That's the UISATs that was led by the Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology, and they are the technical organ for the Caribbean Meteorological Organization, and they serve as the regional climate center for WMO in the Caribbean. And they began this, as I said, under the Global Framework for Climate Services, and of course that the success of that led to the idea of expanding beyond hydrometeorological hazards into developing a regional consortium that would be looking at multiple hazards in a much broader manner. And this was also a result of challenges that were identified in the early warning systems through some previous studies. And so one of the ways that we're trying to reach out from the regional level, which has this wonderful coordination among regional institutions, is to then get to the national level. And one of the ways in which we've been doing that is through the support of the WMO and the Climate Risk and Early Warning Systems. And through that project, there was the development of standard operating procedures between National Met Services and National Disaster Offices in 4 pilot member states. And these were chosen specifically because they were regional hubs that were serving not only their own countries, but also neighboring countries. So Antigua and Barbuda, through arrangements with the Caribbean Meteorological Organization, provides warnings and forecasts for 4 neighboring member states. And Barbados provides for 2 member states, and Trinidad and Tobago provides hurricane warnings for Grenada, and the Bahamas also provides warnings for the Turks and Caicos Islands. And they are the regional hubs as well for the Caribbean Disaster and Emergency Management Agencies. So they were chosen particularly not only because they were serving national interests, but that they are serving their neighboring countries. And so this is one of the methods by which we're ensuring that what we learn at the regional level is then transitioned to the national level. One of the other things we've been doing, again with support from the crews and WMO, is expansion of the communication through adaptation and implementation of the Common Alerting Protocol, with workshops having been completed recently in Belize and the Turks and Caicos Islands, but we've also continued to ensure that our personnel are trained in the CAP each year that CAP workshops are offered. We also have a strategic roadmap for multi-hazard early warning systems that was developed after multiple years of consultation within our region and including national input. And that was launched in February of this year as part of the wrap-up of the World Bank contribution to CRUISE. And just recently, at the most recent UISATS meeting, which has its own roadmap for 2020 to 2030, one of the challenges they identified in transitioning this successful regional partnership, which CIMH has with the public health, with energy, with agriculture, with tourism, which is not one of the GCF pillars or sectors, but for the Caribbean, tourism is important. And so what they identified was the need for those sector partners to engage their national counterparts to make sure that they're working with the national Met Services. From our perspective as the Caribbean Met Organization, we have helped what is now 10 member states to develop strategic plans that include a national framework for weather, climate, and water services. But that component of the sectors at the national level, engaging directly with the Met Services, has been identified as one of the challenges that we need to ensure that transition of the regional success into the national mode. So thank you very much.
Gracias, Arlene.
Thank you, Arlene, for your comments and remarks. Now, we will make a question on something very topical, forecast based on impact. So for our next member of panel, Engineer Luis Mejia, this question goes for him. The Environmental Observatory of El Salvador has made progress in an information system to produce forecasts based on impacts. And in this regard, we would like to know what are the main problems that you have faced to implement these forecasts based on impacts, and what have been the benefits that users have seen with this new service. Thank you, Celso, and congratulations for such a good CMED meeting. I've been supported since the very, very beginning, and everything is going smoothly. Yes, actually, we have a system for not only an IT system, we have a complete communication system. And to give you a background, since the beginning, we were not alone. I always joke, say that we like inventing the problems of others, and we make a forecast. So what we did was we joined efforts with those sectors that required information beyond the hazard. So in the case of observatory, we have all the services together, geological, meteorological, etc., etc., etc. So a hazard is what is analyzed by these services. But what I want to say is that the consequence or the impact is not the flood. Seen from a meteorological point of view, the impact should be the landslide. So as all the services are together, which is part of the challenge, we did not want to stop with the hazard. We wanted not only to say the millimeters of rainfall we expected, but also say with that rainfall, the air intensity will be this, and this means that weaker roofs will be affected. There could be damages for trees. So in the case of other hazards, it's not enough to say that there will be a landslide. We have to say rocks will be falling that will cause problems with transit or transportation. So we began working with the different sectors to understand what were the impacts they had. We placed this in a matrix, and we made the estimations. We occupied the four levels associated to probability, but also to impact. We preparedness is level 3, development is level 1. When we say we are preparing, it's wrong. We need people who will receive the forecast to be prepared. So we have to tell them, please prepare yourselves, because there is a high likelihood that this will have a severe impact. So we want you to be prepared. That preparedness goes to different sectors. Or that information for preparedness goes to different sectors. We have covered almost all hazards. We are working now with air quality. We are also working on drought. We had heavy rainfalls. Now we are working on droughts. We have also severe storms, waves. One of the difficulties. We want to talk about air quality. Which sector, with which sector should we work air quality? What sector does air quality affects? So there is a lot of information that we have to collect, but working together is what has made possible our progress. At the municipal level, last year we said Metapang municipality roads will be blocked due to this or that event. So we realized that people in Metapang were using this forecast, but in the road where I know that it would be blocked, the landslide had been stabilized. So they knew, I didn't know. So they said that road, there is no problem with that road now because we managed and solved the problem. Now the problem is with this road. And then when we go and check, it's true what they say. What I'm saying is that when we're talking of this kind of forecast, it's a forecast that it should be a concern for everybody. Me as a citizen and for the team, that they also want to have a accurate forecast, but the citizen also collaborates because they also benefit from this alert or warning.
Gracias, Luis.
Thank you, Luis. Obviously, it's a change of paradigm in terms of how to address these type of forecasts for users. I think Celeste was talking about the last mile and how we should be prepared for that last mile with proper science and with proper terms so that everybody can understand what we are talking. And I think this is essential for a forecast based on impacts. So thank you again, Luis. The next member of the panel, Rodri Martinez of the Regional Office for North America, Central America, and the Caribbean. We would like you to comment on the climate risk and early warning system projects, which is also important and very new in the Caribbean. We know that a new phase 2 has been approved from 2023 to 2027. So we would very much like to know what were the main achievements in the first phase of this project and what lessons could be shared and implemented in some Ibero-American countries. Thank you, Celso. And I take the opportunity to thank you and all your team for welcoming us here in Havana. Thank you for your efforts to organize the 18th meeting of CITEM. This is a very good space to share with CIMET about what has happened in the WMO Secretariat and the beneficiary countries and at the regional level. We are very much pleased and proud that this project has concluded and was highly classified, and that is why we are starting a second phase. I would like to share with you some of these elements that are peculiar in this project. On the one hand, the project was based in strengthening hydrometeorological and early warning systems for the services for the Caribbean. It was implemented by the World Bank, and this implies a challenge. How can we implement a project with different agencies participating? And though there have been certain difficulties, we have been able to build a very constructive and positive collaboration in the region and with the World Bank. This being able to implement things together, though it is a challenge, it provides us with a lot of mechanisms to move forward. And on the other hand, when we analyze that this project had three components, one dealt with regional strategy. Arlene mentioned this. This regional strategy for early warning systems. Then there is another component that was dealing with institutional strengthening of early warning systems and hydrometeorological services, and then a third component with some pilot countries. The interesting thing was that besides all the different capacity building activities and a very long list of activities, it focused on structural aspects like governance, which are fundamental for financial sustainability, to make governments providers of funds. So what were the steps that were taken? We worked with 9 countries. We worked at the regional level, and I think that is a key aspect for the success of the project. A strong regional body has been essential for working regionally, and we need to have a strong regional center like CMHA that has been very important in operative terms. This has enabled us to implement all this for the benefit of countries. With a wide consensus through CMO and the different countries, we were able to implement a legislation model that will enable countries to consolidate the role of meteorological services and accordingly to have a legal framework so that funds will be part of the national budgets. This was widely consulted, and the different authorities will continue to adequate this to the different national characteristics. This provides wider legal possibilities for financing the operations. The project enabled us to implement 10 strategical plans in 10 different countries, including the national frameworks for meteorological, hydrological, and climate services. After the 3rd conference on climate, WMO encouraged this, and then we have the national counterparts. We worked with 10 plans that were widely consulted. That is a good thing about this project, because to design each of these plans, we had to consult with the different institutions, and the meteorological services were talking with the different institutions in their country so as to build or design a plan. I think these are some of the great achievements, complemented with a wide list of operational activities that have to do with flood management, communities, marine meteorological services. All these elements are important for the financial sustainability of any project that is to be implemented, and we will increasingly use all this infrastructure in the Caribbean with CMO, CMH, trying to have a more detailed action, taking into consideration the different inputs in regional meetings. The last was the regional meeting in Jamaica, where we had a wide discussion with the members on how this new phase should be. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
We thank Rodney and the members of the panel for their detailed answer to the questions. Now we will continue. We will have a common question for all of you so that you can answer in not more than 3 minutes regarding the prospects and perspectives of all your individual countries and your personal experience as well. The question would be the following: which should be the recommended actions to guarantee continuity of the operations of early warning systems in the countries and its long-term sustainability?
La pregunta,
That is the question that you must answer in around 3 minutes.
rápidamente,
That is in strike, using baseball terminology.
comenzamos por José
We start with Jose.
en strike.
Well, as I said, commitment. Commitment by all institutions. We are talking about early warning systems, and in this meeting, we lack a special team. Those who have to respond in the case of an emergency, civil defense. In most of our country, they are completely divorced. They don't even know each other. Civil protection on the on the one hand, and the meteorological and hydrological service on the other. There is no understanding of the forecast, and this is in detriment of the population, because there will be, they don't know what they have to do, who is going to lead the operations or activity. So if we don't work together, different sectors, forecast centers, emergency responders, and if we do not empower the population with the necessary information, then we're not doing anything. And due to climate change, the events are increasingly extreme, and more people are going to die. And most of these people are the more vulnerable people, because those who have information will respond. But those living in the risk areas, the most vulnerable, are the people with less resources, because they are living in flood areas, in landslide areas, and they are going to die. So it is important to have resources, but our sisterly people of Cuba has shown, if you walk on the street and you ask somebody in case of a hurricane where you have to go, and that person knows. That person knows what they have to do, and that is education, that is preparedness. They know what are the channels, what they have to do. So to maintain this early warning system, we first have to build a community of early warning systems. Thank you. Obviously, it's a great challenge. We need we need knowledge. We need civil defense. We need the decision makers, and there is also an important link. The most modern and traditional communication means the TV, the radio, and the social networks today, aimed at the impact we want to, or the repercussion we want to have on the population. Dr. Arlene, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for this question. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. So I have three main things that I consider to be quite important. That is governance and political will. So if your warnings are to be authoritative, your actions to the public are to solicit the appropriate response, you need to have the appropriate governance in place, and you need the political will. Because it doesn't matter if the forecast is perfect. If you do not have the governance structure that allows that voice from the National Meteorological Service to be the authoritative one, that allows those persons in those positions of authority to have the resources for their message to go out, to have the resources for them to develop the partnerships that they need to succeed, this will not work as well as we would like. The partnerships part is another important part of this equation. So in that lovely diagram that's in the executive action plan of the WMO for early warnings for all, it shows the 4 pillars and then arrows going around representing the partnerships. that is really key. And our Met services need to also be thinking of themselves in a different way. They cannot accomplish all of these new demands on their own. They need to learn how to develop partnerships, especially when it comes to things like impact-based forecasting, where they need the risk knowledge, the vulnerability, and other information from other partners. And so our Met service directors need to think differently and be trained, if they're not yet trained to do so, to think strategically and how to engage with policymakers and persons of that nature, how to engage with the private sector in a way that is a full partnership and not just one of a client marketer mode. And my third one has to do with communication. When we had the Hurricane Committee recently, that was the one thing that stood out among all of the questions that we got from the directors on the Hurricane Committee: how to battle miscommunication, how to battle all sorts of random things that are out there that people are following. So we need to have communication that will solicit the appropriate response. And that brings us back to the first two that I pointed back to, because you cannot have effective communication just from the Met services alone, because some of them do not have that capability. They need to become better communicators. They need to develop partnerships that allow them to communicate well. And they need to learn from social science about what are the best methods by which you can communicate with the communities and the person at the very last mile, so that they will do the appropriate action when the time is necessary. Thank you.
Gracias nuevamente, Arlene.
Thank you again, Arlene. These are essential pillars for an effective operational work in meteorological services. Luis, your remarks? Thank you, Celso. I think I coincide. Culture. Culture is very important. We have to work, at least for us, that is the case. It's not that we think that this happens in another country. This doesn't happen here. I can take care of what is happening here. I think culture, education are very important elements. People need to get used to a reaction, and that their reaction must depend on the information we give them. Dependency is also a key factor in this effort in which we have identified key stakeholders. We need to reach out to them. We need them to know the information we have. For example, water treatment plants. Thunder can affect their pumps. They can put the pumps in standby while the storm or hurricane is going on. But in El Salvador, for example, storms, electrical storms are very, very severe. So we are trying to build dependency on our information. People must be dependent on our information, and if they don't get our information, they must have the need for this information. I coincide with Arlene regarding what she said about communication. The way we communicate is essential. We need to guarantee that these early warning systems for all, that part is a little bit, I have doubts on that part for all. I don't know who are for all. What that means, everything, ecosystems, everything. So this includes population, people with the means of communication. So This is an early warning system for all. To guarantee this will be complicated. But as I was saying, communication, at least in our case, we started with a communication strategy with civil defense because they have the same colors as the warning. The impact colors had the same color as the warning. And this confused the population. If my map is orange and yellow and the warning has not been established, this will confuse the population. Thank you, Luis.
Bien, Rodney.
Rodney. I coincide with all the members of the panel. I would just add some fundamental elements in terms of changing the perception of the authorities dealing with budgets. In terms of operational cost of meteorological services, we need to change that perception. This requires high political efforts. This is an investment for development. If we have effective meteorological service, the state will save money than cutting back on the budgets. On the other hand, there is another front, the domestic front. There's national frameworks. They have the intention of having these cooperation frameworks between the meteorological services and a very wide community that help with the most vulnerable communities, because the meteorological service can't do everything. So these are two fronts that are fundamental for the evaluation and the traditional working methodology. And we need to work on this, and projects must include a line of work on these terms, because it's the only way to guarantee sustainability. We cannot think guaranteeing sustainability with more and more projects, and we have to capitalize everything the countries have. I'm talking about collective intelligence and know-how, NGOs, civil society. So I think these are two feasible scenarios where we have to change traditional schemes. We need to change according to time. Thank you. Thank you, Rodney. We could have time for one or two questions by the audience if somebody wants to make a question or any comment. Costa Rica, you have the floor. Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the invitation for participating, and I want to congratulate the organizer for this event. And somebody said or mentioned, I don't know if it was Professor Talas, somebody talked about human resources, reduced personnel. This is something important in our services. What policies could we adopt as countries to solve this problem of personnel? We know times change. Human resources are not so. We have more professionals and technicians, and so sometimes the staff or personnel to maintain our meteorological services are difficult. In Costa Rica, we have a problem. Meteorologists are going to work in the financial national system, working with big data and with other things similar. They are attracted by this sector because they have better salaries. So I think this is a challenge we all have, and I would like to know if you think there is any proposal I think this is something that as a community, we as a guild, we should start thinking about how to improve the conditions of the personnel, because I think it's a very important issue. Thank you.
Uno de los panelistas.
Who in the panel will like to answer? Well, I'll talk about our experience. 70% of my engineers, technicians, experts in networks, and IT experts have left. And that is why I mentioned the commitment, the political will of the government is very, very important. So our task, in the case of Venezuela, we can discuss directly with the President of the Republic. That is not the case in most countries. You have to talk with the director, then you have to talk with the Minister of Environment. But we can talk directly with the President about the need of specialized personnel. And we have protected
la vicepresidenta, manejar esa nómina protegida y
roles. And we have demonstrated with data that saving life and risk management actions have worked and have succeeded. In events with less rainfall, 200, 300 persons died. Now, events or systems like the early warning systems, we have no casualties, we have no deaths. So, in terms of risk management, that is very important. We have shown what happened before and what is happening today. The importance of working on early warning system, on risk management, and to maintain the personnel that will inform the decision makers. So we have protected payrolls. That is a good experience. So personnel is coming back because our countries in Latin America have very good scientists and experts, and it is an important issue. Thank you, Jose. Arlene, you have the floor.
I would like to add, thank you very much for that good example, because I am now serving on the WMO's panel for socioeconomic benefits. And one of the roles of that panel is to gather stories like this so that we can share with our members. And also the WMO will be developing a toolkit that all of the Met services can apply to show the return on investment to their countries of how much is benefited economically and socially from investing in their Met services, that the return is so much more than what they put in. And so I'm very pleased to hear this kind of story, and any others that are available. Professor Tamayo would put them together as part of the group's contribution that could be put forward to the WMO panel. We had our very first meeting right after the Executive Council in June. So this is the start of that process. Coming out of the previous Congress, this was one of the requirements from our members. Thank you.
Professor
Professor Pedrizal, please.
Yeah, while looking at this from global perspective, we have seen positive stories in all of the WMO regions, and the key issue is the provision of good services. So then, if you are not able to provide good services, then your government doesn't believe in you, and you have to have also certain marketing approach to tell the government that it makes sense to invest, and all these disasters that we are facing today, you could use those also as marketing tools and demonstrate that if there would be better services, we would be able to avoid both human losses and economic losses. And the salary is sometimes an issue, but sometimes not. We have plenty of staff members at the Met Services who love the substance that they're dealing with. I always remember when I was running my med service, I was asking why the IT people wanted to work for the med service, although they could have earned the double salary at the private sector. And some of the young guys said that once they go to the nightclub and tell that they are working for the med service, it's an attraction for the girls.
Muchísimas gracias. Bueno,
Thank you very much. I think Rodney will take the floor, will be the last one to take the floor. Please, Rodney. I wanted to avail myself of this occasion on the economic benefits because the first essential step is to provide good services, but also to show how important it is for the GDP of the nation. Those figures, and I want to pay tribute to CIMEC, that there was a great effort by CIMEC to support studies on economic benefits, but socio-economical studies are not enough. You have to go out with them and talk to ministers, to authorities, and show with evidence and serious studies what it means to invest in med studies and services. It is important to know those CMED services included a lot of effort, but the next phase was not continued. I mean, using them as strategic tools by governments for med services. It would be good to take that up because times are increasingly critical. Yes, Rodney.
Un tema de total actualidad.
It is a very present issue.
También lo mencionó
Jorge
en su
mentioned
presentación
it today in his
Es un
presentation.
tema muy común en
My
todos los
introduction
países
of
desarrollados,
cement. It is a
todos
common
nuestros países.
problem for all
Creo que
med services in our countries, and it should be dealt with. We should share experiences
porque está claro que hay
because
cuestiones
clearly
que tienen que
there are
ver con
matters
inversiones,
having to do with investments
con recursos,
and
y hay
resources,
otras
and
cuestiones que
others
tienen
have
que
to
ver
do
también con la parte de la preparación, la
with
formación
training of
de los recursos
people,
humanos que al final son lo que hacen
because in the end they are the ones
servicio
who will
meteorológico
provide
tenga una mayor
a good
eficiencia,
med
un
service
mayor
that is
logro en la
efficient
gestión de lo que
and
hacemos en cada
successful
uno de nuestros países.
in each country.
Por eso que es un tema que
That
es
is
de
why
suma
this is a
importancia.
very important
Quizás
topic.
habría que verlo también,
Perhaps we have to see it also
con una óptica más
from
actualizada
a
de los
more
problemas,
updated approach
porque quizás aquí
in
en
view
Cuba
of present problems, because in Cuba there is a saying
no me lo sepa muy bien, pero algo así
which
que,
is more or less like this.
si seguimos haciendo lo
If you
mismo,
continue
nunca
doing the
vamos a
same
obtener
thing, we will
otros
never
nuevos resultados.
get new
O
results.
sea, vamos a enfrentar una
We will
problemática
be dealing with a
desde una
problem
visión igual que la que
from
enfrentábamos
a
hace 20
vision
años atrás
as we did
y no
20 years
vamos a
ago,
tener resultados.
and no results will
Habrá
be
que
attained.
pensar
We will have
de
to
la
think
manera más moderna, más innovativa,
in a modern
cómo
and
enfrentar
innovative
ese
way
problema en la
to
actualidad,
deal with
en
the
las
problem
condiciones actuales,
in the
para lograr
present,
tener
under the
mejores
present
resultados
conditions to
con,
attain better
esta
results.
situación que, como vemos,
As
es
we
algo
see,
común. O sea, que no es
that's
solamente
something
algo
that
que
is
pudiera ser,
frequent.
quizás
It
puede
is
ser
not,
más acentuado
perhaps
en
it
otros,
is
o
more
una
present in
región
other
algo más
countries than
o menos,
in another,
pero
and
en
so on.
general es un
But in
problema
general,
común que tenemos
it
que
is a
pensarlo
common
todos
problem we
de
have
manera
to
innovativa, de manera
approach
creativa, con
innovatively
nuevas
and
formas
creatively
de hacer
with
para
new
lograr los
ways,
resultados esperados.
with
Yo
new
creo que
forms
sí,
of
Rodney decía, hay
action to
experiencias en la
obtain new
CIMEC
results.
que
There are
quizás tengamos que
CIMEC
revisar de
experiences
nuevo
that we will
y
have to
poner
go
en
over
el
again,
contexto
perhaps,
actual
and to
para
put
poder
them and
también
to adapt
crear
it to the present
que puedan
context,
servir
so
a las
that
nuevas
they can
generaciones
serve
también de
or
meteorólogos que
may
tenemos, de
be of
trabajadores
use
en general de los
for
servicios
weather
meteorológicos de cada
forecasters
uno de nuestros
and med
países.
service
Yo
people in our
agradezco a los
various countries. I would
panelistas,
like to thank the
cada uno de manera
panelists
individual
individually
y por sus acertadas
for
respuestas
their
y también por el
good
tiempo que
answers
hemos
and for the
empleado
time we
para
have spent
el panel de la
in
tarde
this
de hoy.
panel this
Evidentemente es
afternoon.
un tema que
Evidently,
pudiéramos
it is
estar
a topic
conversando
that
todo un día o
could
dos, pero bueno, hay
take
que
1 or
ir
2 days,
haciéndonos,
but
ajustándonos a
we
nuestra
have to
agenda,
stick to our
porque
agenda
finalmente es un tema
because
de mucha
really it is a
importancia.
very important
Yo
question.
quisiera agradecer también
I would also like to thank
Jorge en particular,
Jorge
a
and
Rodney,
Julian and Rodney
a otros de los
and
colegas,
other
a
colleagues,
Bárbara también,
Barbara,
que han estado de conjunto
who
ayudándonos
have been
en la
helping us
conformación de la agenda de hoy.
to draft today's agenda.
Confieso que al principio
I
casi que
confess that
no
initially
ni sabíamos qué era lo que
we
queríamos
didn't know
lograr,
what we wanted
pero
to
la idea
do,
yo
but
creo que al
the
final por lo
idea
menos
at
yo
the
me siento
end
satisfecho de que hayamos
has
podido
been a good one. We have been
compartir
able to share our
experiencias de la CIMED
experiences
con un auditorio mucho mayor
from CIMET
y
with
que también
a
nosotros
larger
podamos estar
audience,
compartiendo durante estos
and
días
we will be
en el
sharing
marco
those
del Congreso de Cambio
experiences
Climático
during these
todas estas
days of the
experiencias, porque
Congress.
no
We
solamente lo
will
que
share
vamos a
all
hacer en
these
las
experiences,
sesiones,
not only in
sino también que
sessions,
podemos intercambiar
but
de
we'll
manera
also have
personal con los
exchanges
participantes en el
personally with
Congreso.
participants in
Pero
the
creo que al
Congress.
final, Jorge, no sé
In
si
the end,
coincides o no con
Jorge, I do
nosotros,
not know
pero
if you
creo que
coincide with me,
al final
but
esta
in the end,
sesión híbrida,
this
que
hybrid
al principio no sabíamos bien
session
cómo
that we
organizarla,
initially had doubts
creo que ha
about
sido
its
realmente
organization
provechosa
has
y
been
en el
really
horario del
fruitful,
almuerzo
and during
muchas
lunch
personas, sobre todo
many
los
persons,
participantes que no son de
particularly
CIMEC, no solo de Cuba,
persons who
también
do
de
not
otros países,
belong
porque
to
hay
CIMET
participantes extranjeros
in
también
Cuba or in
de
other
otros países en
countries,
el Congreso de
because
Cambio
we also have
Climático.
foreign
Varios nos comentaban de la importancia que
delegates
había
in
sido
the Climate
conocer
Change Congress,
de
told
primerísima
us
mano,
how
de sus
important it was to
primeros
know
autores,
firsthand
la presencia hoy aquí, como es lógico, de nuestro secretario general,
from the authors and
de
from the
los
General
directores de
Secretary
los servicios
and
meteorológicos de
the
Iberoamérica
directors of
y otros
Iberoamerica Weather
invitados que
Forecasting
nos
Services
acompañan acá,
and other
pues han podido
guests
tener esa vivencia de manera
the
directa.
information
También agradecemos a
about
los
these
que nos han
matters. We
estado
also
enviando sus
thank
videos,
those who
que
have
por
been
diferentes
sending us
motivos
their
no pudieron
videos
estar
who could not
presencialmente con nosotros
be
acá,
impressed
pero que
with
hemos
us,
podido disfrutar de
but
sus
we have
intervenciones y eso me
had
parece que ha
their
sido también
interventions in a way
importante
that's
para el
also very
debate. Por lo
important for
tanto,
our
yo
debate.
creo
So I
que la
believe
experiencia no salió tan mal,
that this
así
experience
que
has gone
quizá
well,
la sigamos repitiendo en
and
algún
perhaps we will
momento
do it
en otros
again
lugares donde
in the
tuviéramos esa
future
posibilidad
when
también
we
de
had this
compartir en un evento
possibility. I mean,
científico y
sharing during a
compartir
scientific
también
event,
nuestros trabajos
sharing our
operativos de nuestros
information and
servicios
what we have been
meteorológicos y
doing
hidrológicos
as
nacionales
weather
en sus
forecasters
fortalezas,
in our
sus
countries with
debilidades
their
y los
weaknesses and
retos que
strengths
tenemos que
and
enfrentar
the challenges
en este
we
futuro cercano.
are
Así
facing
que a todos
or
muchísimas
that we
gracias, a los
will
panelistas, a los
face.
participantes,
So we thank the
a todos
panelists,
los que están
the
acá y a los que
participants,
ya no están,
everybody,
pero que estuvieron gran parte
and
del día
also
con
those
nosotros.
who
Nuestro
stay
agradecimiento
with
por
us
habernos
for a long time
acompañado
of the
en la
day.
jornada del día de hoy.
And we
Muchísimas
thank
gracias.
you all for sharing your day with us. Good day. Thank you.
Hay solo información.
De orden,
Some information for you.
dos cuestiones.
Two questions.
Mañana,
Tomorrow,
la sesión de la CIMEC
the CIMEX session will
como ya hemos dicho, en
continue
este mismo salón,
in this hall
ya en los horarios de Jorge de 8:30 de
from
la mañana.
8:30.
O sea que a las 8:30 de la
At
mañana,
8:30.
es así, Jorge, ¿no?
Right.
8:30 de la mañana comenzamos la sesión
We will start
número 2 de la CIMEC.
the second session of
Repito, aquí en
CIMEC
este mismo salón.
in this very hall.
Los exhorto que disfruten esta noche.
Enjoy the
Porque las
your
próximas
evening
noches vamos a
because
tener
the
también
next evening, the following
algunas otras
evenings, we
actividades.
will have some other
Ya
activities.
mañana nos pondremos de acuerdo.
Tomorrow we
Ya hoy
will
se decía de que tenemos
coordinate